control. Breach in 5, 4, 3.
What's up, guys? I'm Uncle Freedom, coming to you on another glorious and well-deserved day off, and today marks the first installment into the Bags of Preparedness saga. So what do I mean by Bags of Preparedness? The get-home bag, your everyday carry bag, your bug-out bag, your load-out bag, your extended bug-out bag, your ditch kit, your inch bag. God, we have a lot of bags. But today, specifically, we're going to take a look at the first one here, and that is your get-home bag. So if that sounds fun and interesting to you, go ahead and like, subscribe, tell a friend. Maybe you're just interested in being more prepared, or you've heard a lot of these things thrown around and you're kind of curious how to get started in it. This isn't really a truths video per se, but that is coming. If you're looking to get in touch with me, you can find me at Uncle Freedom 213 on Instagram or Facebook, or Uncle Freedom 213 at Outlook.com. On Facebook and Instagram, there is a Linktree account in the website's portion. Go ahead and follow that. It takes you to affiliates of the channel, people like Dark Angel Medical, Bourne Tactical, Coltac, C&H Precision, Gun Mag Warehouse, like lots of guys. We're adding new all the time. Even got some firearm manufacturers that are coming on board. So we're going to be looking at some neat stuff, how to do things on a lower budget, and I'm looking forward to sharing that with you guys. So let's get into this. Your get home bag. So get home bags. What is it? Well, simply put, your get home bag is part of an emergency system that is light and purpose driven that will allow you to get from wherever you are back home where most of your stuff is. What it's not is a bug out bag. A bug out bag is getting you from A, which would be your home, where the situation has become untenable, and now you are trying to get to another location that you already have, because if you don't have that, you're just walking. You're getting to point B where you will be more safe and have access to more supplies that you have kept there. So when we look at this bag, it should cover a few things. But when we all talk about get home bag, we talk about them in the vein of we have our bag and then we have like our rifle and our armor and all of this stuff. But I'll ask you a question about get home bags. We're going to actually look at the scenario based, but another question I would field to you is, what if it's not shit hit the fan and it's something as simple as you smoked a deer with no cell service and you have, because you know the area, 15 miles till you are able to find someone to get you help? Do you leave your rifle and armor and everything in the car, chancing a risk that somebody could take it while you're gone and not having those resources with you? Or do you take off in a scenario that's not conducive to that with all of it on you? Questions you actually have to answer yourself. I can't provide you the right answer for that because honestly, I'm torn by it. But I live in a place where if I walked up with a rifle because I didn't want to leave it in the car, I'm probably not going to get looked at differently. So how do we set up your get home bag? Well, first and foremost, you got to ask yourself some questions. So to answer these questions, I figure we'll do this scenario based wise because I think that's the best way to look at it. So here's your scenario. In Nebraska, it's not uncommon for us to travel anywhere from 30 to 60 miles every single day to get to work because everything in Nebraska is about an hour away from everything else. So taking where I used to live, it was a 45-mile drive to get to my office every single day, 5 days a week. So we'll vein that there. It's a 45-mile journey that I have to make to get back home. The situation is most definitely shit hit the fan, and we have zero comms. I was in my car and it suddenly stopped working. My cell phone is off and down. The radios are gone. All of the power is out. We have an EMP. So, first question I'm going to ask myself for setting up a bag with that scenario in mind is, how far do I actually need to go? Your get home bag is a dynamic and ever-changing bag. There's no such thing as building it and putting it in your car and leaving it for 2 or 3 years. You should be updating or changing that bag and system to coincide with where you find yourself at next. If I was going to say do something where my get home was only 10 miles away, I am not going to carry the same stuff I would with a 45-mile journey. I'm also going to change it for things like seasons, food availability. All these other things are going to go into what I change in that bag to provide for the current situation I find myself in, and not just make it once and leave it alone. So, how far? It's 45 miles. 45 miles on a flat interstate to get from A to B. But if I step off of that and actually do this because we have just decided this is Teotihuacan, I'm not going to be 60 miles or 45 miles. We're probably going to be looking closer to 60 because I'm not traveling on the easiest course of action. So the next question we're going to ask ourselves looking at our bag is, how long do we project this to take? So if I'm looking at anything and I said, well, the Army standard for ruck marching is a 45 to 50 pound pack in armor with a rifle, you should be able to cover roughly 12 miles in 3 hours or walk at 4 miles per hour no matter what with that stuff on. That sounds great. But we're also handed food in the route. It's a one-time event. We're going balls out because we don't have to worry about what happens next. We're just getting there. We're constantly topped off and plussed up on water and things of that nature. So we're not carrying 90 pounds of stuff in our bag. We're only carrying the packing list. But we also have to look in how long, because if all you're carrying is water and that's what you're doing, but you're not really eating any food, your electrolyte balance will go off. You'll start suffering cramps. You could possibly force yourself into terrible diarrhea. All these things are bad for your survival rate. So you're not going to do it. A good advancement for what I have is if we said 45 miles away, it would take me roughly, if I really pushed the envelope, I could be home in 2 days. But we can't look at that. We have to say 60%, 60 to 66% increase just in your walk because of the situation you found yourself in. You may do great your first day, but I promise you on day 2, you won't cover the same distance because your body's going to start revolting. It's a calorie game. If you're not constantly eating and you don't have food, you're going to be slower, therefore putting you in the field for a longer amount of time. You have to have food. You also have to have water or you will die. You also have to think about other things like sunburning yourself, or the route that you were playing. All of these things go into it. Just know that your standard thought of I'm going to walk 4 miles an hour, you're not going to. So again, increase how long you think it should take by about 66%, and then plan for that and some. Your next question I'm going to ask myself is, what is the climate I expect to be working in? Now, when I say climate, you have to think of it. We had a statement in the military, it was cotton kills, and if you sweat, you die. So let's say, for example, I'm walking in an environment in which we have right now for a climate. 2 days ago, it was 79 degrees and the low was in the low 60s. And if you looked at the forecast today, it was supposed to be in the mid 60s, sunny and clear with a low tonight in the upper 40s. However, I will tell you that the weatherman got it wrong because the high today is 42. It's been raining for the last 14 hours, and tonight the low is 26. Yeah, that's a big difference. So if I'm hauling balls to the wall because it's 74 degrees and I've got all my stuff packed onto me, all my gear, I'm going for the mail, all I'm doing, I go to stop for the night, the temperature suddenly plummets and the wind picks up, I now go hypothermic and die because I didn't plan according to the climate I expected to actually work in. Climate's a big one. You have to go through and look at the climate for where you're at and what it does this time of year typically. The next question you're going to have to ask yourself is, what terrain do I expect to traverse? Now, this is going to be handled in a couple of things, but if you did this correctly when you put the stuff in your car, you had your bag with your equipment in it, but you also had a good solid change of clothes and hiking boots and a hat and whatever else you needed, not just what you have on. And those things, the initial change, should not be in the bottom of your bag. That should be separate, that you put on before you leave. So now we're going to look at terrain. Is it flat? Is it hilly? Are there cliffs? What about canyons? How about rivers? What about lakes, roads, cropland, mud? All of these things I have to think about in between A and B. So my next question is, what is the terrain I'm expected to face? Do I need to find a way in my actual stuff Like, do I need to worry about waterproof boots, or is there never any water where I'm going? Is it completely flat like Kansas? I live in Nebraska. We're not Kansas. It's not flat here ish. But I have to look at that. When I looked at my, my terrain where there are cliffs in between there, what about canyons where I'm going to be going up and down, all that stuff? I have to think about that in planning out for what my get home bag is for that situation. Again, get home bag is dynamic and ever changing with the situation you find yourself in and the season you plan to do it in. The next one we're going to have to look at, and the question I'm going to ask now that I've gotten this far, is what is my route? Now, your route planning is going to be highly influenced by what type of situation you found yourself in. We just stated it was an EMP. Here's the deal. We know it's an EMP because as we were in town, we started seeing people run out of Walmart without paying for stuff, and the cops are all on the side of the road because they don't have any communication anymore. So when I plan my route, now I have to think about, okay, well, how do I get to A to B? But I need to stay off of linear danger areas, which would be roads and bridges. But I have to cross a river. So where can I cross this river at so that I don't draw attention? I also do have the least chance of soaking my gear, being able to cross it effectively without causing myself any danger. And more importantly, without walking on a bridge where everyone can see me. What do I need to do to avoid the 4 population areas between my home and where I'm leaving from? Because people are bad in this kind of a situation. Remember, good people do bad things. Well, also, is it harvest time in Nebraska? Because if it's harvest time in Nebraska, a lot of those cover elements I may have had, like grown cornfields and stuff, are all chopped down and a different color. So what do I do there? How do I get from A to B? Another thing I have to think about, so I'm avoiding population centers. Am I doing this? Do I plan my route so that I can go near other things? Which leads me to my next point, which is what are the resources that you either installed or naturally exist between where you're coming from and your home? So if you have cache of equipment in the woods at this specific location, that's great. Can you find that without GPS because everything just went pear-shaped? Can you do it with a map? Can you do all these things? Or what are the odds that you will find it? Also, can you survive without it if there are people in that location when you get there? What's your plan for that? Do you have running fresh water between where you're going and where you're going to? Do you have an area that if you drop down into this wash, it's full of wood sorrel and wild edibles all during this time of year, and I have clean running well water or clean running stream that's fed by a spring over here where I can top off and replenish my water? Is there a spot where I know there are a million squirrels and turkeys and I'm going to be able to harvest something with little to no impact and not being seen to get from A to B? Also, you have to look at those, and the biggest one for me is, what are the food sources that you would normally find for the time of year in which you find yourself in? Is that running water or pond that you would typically use? Is that frozen now because it's wintertime? Just because it's frozen doesn't mean there's snow on the ground. So you have to look at that. How do you get the water knowing that it's frozen this time of year? And the next one that we're going to ask ourselves is security. Do you have perimeter alarms? The ability to do a perimeter alarm? Did you plan your route in such a way that you were backed up to a cliff or a wall where the only thing you had to worry about was the stuff in front of you? How do you plan to get sleep? Do you have scrim to camo your stuff? Are you carrying a firearm? Are you carrying body armor? Are you planning to move at night versus in the day? I will tell you, if you don't know your stuff like the back of your hand, moving at night is a good way to die. Even if you have night vision, if you haven't spent just a very abnormal amount of time walking around in it, it's a really good way to die. You have to be proficient at all of these things, which means that you have to think about how we're going to do the security side of aspect as we're moving. And the last big thing I'm going to think about is special considerations for the environment in which I find myself in. So what do I mean by special considerations? So in Nebraska, at any given point, if I step out of anything and I'm not behind a tree cover, I can be seen for 6 to 10 miles in any direction because Nebraska's big and open. How do I avoid that? If I were to, my plan was to go through this cut cornfield, and now I'm in the top of this cornfield, even though I may be in a cornfield 2 to 3 miles off of the main road, I can still be seen by anybody on the main road. What time of year is it? So in Nebraska, once we start harvest, everything is brown. If I have an OD green tent, I'm going to be hyper visible once I get out there in that area. So what does the camo look like for your area? How do you blend in with your surroundings? How do you become a gray man during that time of year as you're moving through your environment? The same deal applies. If I'm in a perfectly lush area, butted up to a hidden little pond, and I have a flat, dark earth colored tarp, much like the one behind me, if I have that on, I have a brown square in an area that is mostly green. That is a special consideration. Knowing that people can see me through any type of optic for 5 miles as I move up, I'm not surprising them, and odds are they had the jump on me miles ago. What's my solution to that? How do I plan around it? How much more time is it going to take me to go north a lot into the canyon lands, work my way through those canyon lands by using a topographical map so I don't die, or actually, ledge myself up somewhere where I can't get down and I can't get back up? How do I do that and still affect my ability to get back home? Other special considerations: if you live in the Rocky Mountains or somewhere like that, you have dangerous wildlife, rattlesnakes, big spiders, mountain lions, bears. During the time of year in which you're in, is that something you have to be overly concerned about? Do you have an area where you know that this guy is pretty much known as being a little bit on the fringe, but he's a kind of a dangerous dude now that the inevitable event he hoped would happen just happened? Do you have a plan to deal with this guy who will shoot you in the face if he even so much as notices you walking by? What are your plans to deal with a special consideration in your area? And those are going to be totally different based on where you're at and where you plan to go. If I'm in Lincoln, Nebraska, I have an entirely different set of special considerations, which are there is a mass amount of population that I have to get out of before I can be safe. So the biggest things to take away from this when we build a get home bag is your get home bag is not just a bag. Your get home bag is that system. It's those broken in hiking boots you have in the back. It's the change of clothes that puts you into an earth colored cargo pant that's comfortable, you can walk in, that dries quickly. It's having good socks in your bag, in your stuff, so that you can change and put that stuff on. It's having wet weather layers or insulative layers, or knowing how to layer your clothing so you don't sweat and die when the temperature drops. And then building that bag out with what you need to get home. I've never in my life seen anybody pissed that they had an extra MRE when we got hungry. One of those special considerations to come up with when we're walking is, can you prep the food you're carrying without a fire? Can you prep that food without water? Protein takes more water to process into your system. So if all you have is beef jerky and suddenly you can't get water, you're going to be more dehydrated because you ate jerky. You have to have a plan to do things not just one way, but multiple ways. Let's say, for example, on the food side of stuff, you have some Mountain House and you have some MREs. If suddenly you find yourself in an environment where you can't use a jet boil or an Espit tablet in order to boil up some water to make your Mountain House, maybe you have an MRE you can eat cold to get some good calories in your system. Maybe you have a different solution for water. You have to think about these things ahead of time. Your only option may be boiling water and not using that life straw you thought about. You have to be able to plan this stuff out. It sounds like a big undertaking, but if you break down what's really essential to your life and you follow these very specific questions to ask yourself, I promise you'll be farther along on the way to building out an effective get home system that makes you successful if the worst day of your life ever happens. So guys, that was the first one in the Bags of Preparedness sagas, the Get Home Bag. Stay tuned because we're going to go through each one of these, and yes, there will be some uncomfortable truths about get home bags coming in the very near future. So guys, I am Uncle Freedom. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Until next time, I'll see you later.